Chris, welcome to the Guild of Dads podcast.
Great to be on. Pleasure to you get us on tonight.
Likewise. What is I found fascinating about you is that I can't even remember how I first linked up with you, but I have linked up with you, and every weekday evening, it seems, during December, I'd be on my way to Aldi and your live stream would pop up and I'd start listening to it, and then my wife would ring me some minutes later and say, when are you going to be back from Aldi? And I'd be like, I just got delayed, and the reason being was because I was sitting in the car park at Aldi listening to you having conversations with your guests. And what I really loved about the conversations that you have on your own podcast, the Darkside podcast, is the way that they are quite organic, and you really do delve into the kind of art of conversation, as I would call it. Where did your inspiration for the Darkside podcast come about, Chris?
You're talking about 5 years ago now, so this has been a continuation of like 5 years. Because originally, what it started from, it was originally the page was called Welcome Back to Darkside. Now, what that correlated to was the book. It was my second book I wrote, and it was the case of I only wrote one previous to that, so it was like Darkness Be My Friend. It came, and you kind of got to go back on the story. But originally, what it was part of like that I call like almost therapy, and was like journaling. I found it was like to be a massive help. So all the thoughts, this, that, put it all into words. But it's very small little sentences that I kind of thought, oh, well, that would work. I kind of thought that, right? What can I think of that? So it's kind of like you get the 3 steps, almost your 3 goals or your gratitude lists and everything. So what I did was I started putting a lot more context into it. So I started writing things down, just little sentences. And what it was that then suddenly built up, and I suddenly thought, and something I always wanted to do was write a book. And it was just, and I just had this idea, and it was like just the idea and the little story, and then try and get the context and background, fit it into place. So originally, what I did was these chapters started just falling into place as I was starting to build the ideas, create it, and it just took a while, but it all kind of fell into place. And what it was, and it was like a personal achievement to myself, that I wanted to write this book. I wanted to, if it was one life goal that I wanted to tick the box off, was always write a book. And I was like, right, I've done that now. So what it was I came back and I was like, right, so what can I do now? And what I wanted to do was I'd had quite a bit of journaling that I'd put down on the word. And I was like, right, how do I build this into a book? How do I build this into a story? And I didn't really want to kind of say, hey, look at me, it's my story. Because to me, I'm just one of thousands. I am just literally just, there's so many people with a story behind them. So what I kind of done was started, like I said, kind of put it into this context of chapter by chapter. And what it did was to create the book. And it was kind of like I used the word, the first book was Darkness Be My Friend, because when you're in that mindset, it's very dark and it's that part of it. But then Welcome Back to Darkside, and people said it's a very dark title. Why choose that? And I kind of said, it's like you go back into that area of your life, but then you choose how to change the game, how to play the game. Because people often forget that when they go through these hard times, they often think, this is me, nothing's going to change. But what it is you can always step that one step further, come back on yourself and change the way things are. So what I did was I wanted, like I say, welcome back to the dark side. So you've already been in that place. You've kind of evolved that 1 or 2 steps forward. You've then gone back and changed it. And all I wanted to do was kind of, this is what helped me. This is what I experienced. This is what I thought, this is how I felt. So what I wanted to do is so people had that idea. Thus, then when Instagram started, obviously, I'd never really spent any time on Instagram, to be honest. I just thought, it's just people putting pictures up, there's nothing of value that, and I just kind of overlooked it. And I was kind of like, I'd always had Facebook. Then I started thinking, I'll just create my own personal page. And what it was I started thinking, if I add this into my page, but I didn't want just a quote. I didn't want something that people just scroll by. You see, what it would be, I wanted to have something that correlated to text underneath. Always got to have like context to it, because a lot of people will put a quote to it. But I used to say, well, why did you put that for? What does that mean to you? What does that, like, explain something? Is it a thought? Is it a feeling? So I'll always add the context into it. And people started actually liking it, started getting a bit more following, a bit more likes of the. And I thought, this seems to be working. And what it was actually, obviously, a mate of mine I'd been following for a while, obviously, Gavin Jones. We started chatting backwards and forwards. And I says to him, I said, I'm going to launch this as an original page. because I think it's got some real depth to it. And I asked him, and I said, what do you think? I mean, the guy's like a best-selling author, you know, New York Times, and like, I was like, when he said, yeah, go for it, it's good. And I was like, right, I'm on it. So I created its own page, and it kind of grew from there. And like with every story, and I always say it, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with that single step, and you have to start somewhere. And I remember I had one follower. That was it, one follower. And I think I got about 2 likes. And I was like, well, that's first post done. And it just built and built and built. And what it was as I was building the page, I'd already kind of wrote and released Went Back Darkside. I published it on Amazon, and I never really thought much of it. So I'd already had the context and the information there, but I'd never used it really on its own. I then started writing. It was one called Light Within the Dark Side. So I'd want to do is transform it into like a trilogy. So you kind of got the beginning, the middle, and then that end part of like that evolution. So that was something that I'd always been massively interested in. And then once again, it started building. And then what it was I started writing my 4th book, and that was The Art of Chasing Demons and the 7 Sins, because I'd always had this idea, is there a connection between addictions and sins? And what I started doing was taking pieces out of the book and then actually putting a post out there with words on it, so you got that like relatable context. And I found people, then I started getting a lot more like following, and people was, oh, I like this, I like that. And that's what it was. It started just building and me following. And obviously that started like expanding, started following a lot more people, and it's got bigger. And then as like, obviously time went by, suddenly it was last year, obviously with lockdown, and I was like, someone just clicked in my head. I'd been listening to a lot of podcasts for a long time, for about a good 6 months, a year, something like that. And I'd listened to that many. And I thought, instead of putting a post out there saying, oh, I really like this person, this comes from this person, I decided that I wanted to speak to these people. And I was like, could I do this? So I built up a pretty good relationship, you know, with quite a few people. And I was like, right. So I thought, right, I'll just do a little, I kind of done a few intros almost, and just started doing it like background, because people always ask, how did you get into writing? And I was like, right, if I put it into like a podcast form, people look and listen to it and might get some ideas from it. Because I always said, if a person get one thing from this, you know, and if it helps one person, that's my job done. And believe me, I would have been finished a long time ago, you know, because I found it, and I don't know where it come from. And the following just kept building and building and building. It was like this momentum just happening, and every like posting I started seeing, it's not like a place from ego, but you kind of, or that whole like dopamine hit of like when you log in and you see so many people like your post, or you know the feedback I was getting, but I did start seeing this like the likes started getting higher, the shares, you know, the comments, the positive feedback, and I was like, right, okay. So I started just building it up, and it was actually through that time of releasing that book, The Art of Chasing Demons, that I found that this is when I started connecting with a lot more people. I started like networking, and what I found was I was getting the people on, and the first guest was Jane McGill, a friend of mine, and we thought, oh, we'll just roll with it, you know, we'll just have like, I thought, well, to do a podcast, do I do a Zoom, do I do a Skype? And I thought this idea's come in my head of like, well, why don't I just use Instagram Live? You know, just simply just go on there. It's an hour. It is 1 hour where I've got to be like disciplined. And I thought, I'd listened to quite a few podcasts anyway, so I had this like idea that sometimes I found that people were quite structured. You probably found yourself. Some people were just like, right, I've got 10 questions. I want you to answer 10 questions. I didn't want that format. I wanted it so relaxed that people, because believe me, before, and it still happens even to this day, before you do a podcast, you're like, breathe. Your anxiety's starting to hit that roof of like, right, I'm speaking to people, and some of the guests it was literally a couple of minutes beforehand, I'd have to literally just start, calm myself down, right, I've got this. And people are saying, you're so natural. And I was like, you never saw us 5 minutes before I even press record, you know? But it was that part that, and then speaking to obviously one person, and I started thinking, all right, well, that seemed to go quite well. So I started asking other people that I obviously got connections with. And I was like, oh, do you want to come on? And I was like, yeah. And it just built and built. And especially for that lockdown period, I was doing like 3 a week. And then what it was I started thinking, oh, I get this person on, I get that person on, and some of them have become very good friends now, like Eddie Cohn, very good friend of mine now. And like me and Eddie always chatting backwards and forwards. Like I said, obviously I had Dean Stott on there, who I'd obviously met previously, and that was actually through Gaze as well. I went to London and done the Veteran State of Mind live podcast. So I met up with Dean there and Gaze and a few other people, and it was just these guests that found, and I was surprised myself that they were interested in coming on and saying, I really like what you're doing. And I was like, right, cool. I'm actually getting some traction here. And it's just built and built and built and built. And to be honest, I don't know how it's got to this point. The people generally are like interested in what I do. And people say you just have this very relaxed way of doing it. Because I think, well, I want to be relaxed. They want to be relaxed, but I don't want to fire loads of questions. What I do is I try and feed that into it. And I'd say that was the long and the short of it. That would be that part of it where that's how it became.
And when you talk about the journaling at the beginning, were you journaling for like a therapeutic value? Was there a reason why you began to journal in the first place, and actually got into the practice of journaling? Because journaling has come up a number of times on recent episodes in my own podcast in terms of particularly men's mental health. In fact, one of my previous guests, John Gray, talks about men needing to have what he calls cave time, and one of the best ways in order to do that is to actually go out and journal out about kind of strong emotions, and either have like a daily journaling practice or a practice of actually journaling when you've got a difficult thing that you're trying to overcome. Was that your experience, that you were using it as a therapeutic thing to actually kind of journal out your thoughts prior to starting writing the books and stuff?
Yeah, it was. I found, because obviously after leaving being medically discharged from the military and the Navy and that, and obviously then finding out that the diagnosis was post-traumatic stress, and I was like, I'd never had a clue what it was, to be honest. I just thought, well, I actually denied it at first. I said, well, how can I have that? I've never served front line, but then it was explained to us it doesn't just affect people that are seeing combat. It explained, and it's all these different elements to it. And I was like, all right, so I started trying to get as much information as I can. And I found myself that writing things down helps, because what it does is sometimes you just don't want to talk about it. You just don't, people ask questions. And it's like, I want to put my thought down on paper or down to a context where I can start looking at it and understanding it. So it's like, but what I found is it's evolved, because with journaling, it's one of those things that you don't have to, and you have like talking therapies. I mean, when I went through CBT, I just kind of walked away from it. They were saying, get a colouring book. Here's a colouring book, do a jigsaw. And I was like, that doesn't work for me. That is, I needed something that was challenging myself in a way that I could put thoughts down, but then I could relate to them and then look at them, because I'm very analytical. And I got to explain how I had like an analytical brain. And they were like, because I was asked, well, what's that? And then the best answer that was given was, when people hear a piece of music, most people are like, oh, I like that. My brain started saying, oh, how do you play it? It's one of those things. I like breaking things down. So I kind of thought, well, why did I feel like this for? Or why did I think that? Or what did I find that part of it? And what I did was I kind of built a bigger picture of it. So it's kind of like on say a Monday, I felt like this when I woke up, or when this time of the day, or that time of the day. So I would challenge those thoughts. I'd say to myself, how can I overcome that? Or how can I, because I'm a natural problem solver. I look at a problem and I think, okay, so that happened. Why did that happen? And the good part about it with journaling is I tried a lot of different like therapies, techniques, meditation. And one of the best ones I found was one called the Method of Loci. So it kind of like the thoughts that I wrote down, it worked with that, because what it technically does is think of it as like a lockable area, somewhere you can go into and you can lock. And what I found was, say a ship, being obviously Navy, and you have, different areas on the ship where you can lock doors, watertight doors. You've even got somewhere that's like disposes of rubbish. So the way the Method of Loci works, it's almost like your thoughts. So you divide your thoughts between positive and negative thoughts. And what you do is you then start breaking those thoughts down further and further and further. And what you do is you remove the negative aspect of it. So you think that was a negative part, but I've removed the positive. What positive was in it? Because I've always said there's always a positive within any negative. And I find that what you do is you extract the negative, but in this like area, this ship that I created in my own head when I was meditating was, right, I'm going to put all that rubbish into that part. That's the bad, that's the negative, put that to one side. Keep the good parts of it and the positive parts and the things I've learned from, the things I can gain that experience from. And I kind of kept separating it. So the thoughts I had, and what I used to do was get a piece of paper and write down the positive side on one side, the negative side on the other side. But what did I learn from that? So journaling has many different angles to it. It's not just say write 3 things down is the most basic ones, the gratitude. And then what I found was I started a job and I was doing direct marketing, and I actually found this, and I didn't realize it was journaling at the time, to explain to us what you do is you've got like 3 goals. So you've got the 3 goals in the morning. So start the day or even at night time, what do you want the next day? So you've got 3 goals, but it was like, okay, so you want to create them, you want to achieve that, but what actions are you going to put to those to make it happen? And this is where journaling works. And there's a lot of people now, it's become massive. It's a whole journaling area because it's such a simple technique. You've got your, like you said, you've got your gratitude lists, you've got your, all this part. And people don't realize that a simple book and a pen, it takes away the whole area of technology. So you haven't got notifications going off every 30 seconds. You can put a phone to one side and get a book, and you can actually write things down. And what it is you're technically, or should I say physically connected to that paper. You're physically connected to that, the whole writing again. So because I kind of had to teach myself how to read and write a bit better, and in a way, because the brain gets a bit scrambled, And what it is I kind of found that having to teach myself how to read and write again in a way that was like, right, how I understood something. So what I did was I was writing things down, but then what I was doing was looking at that and think, okay, so can I take the positive of it from it? What positives? You've always got to look at that aspect. And that's where the whole journaling came around and how I applied it, you see.
That's interesting, because I think that what I've noticed is that in all of the people that I speak to, and particularly dads and men in particular, I think that there is like a need to try and deconstruct things and understand things. And I think that when you kind of are able to take things apart and play around with them and deconstruct them, I think it lessens their power, but it also plays into the kind of male need to try and fix stuff. And because I think for men and dads, we like to kind of be fixers of things, and if we can kind of understand and take apart things, it enables us to feel as if we're kind of from a, you have a previous experience in engineering, and it's that same thing of being able to take something apart and put it back together again. And I love the way when you hear guys like Jordan Peterson, he is like a master at this kind of technique where you'll hear him in lectures and he'll say, I've not quite formed my thoughts. My thoughts aren't fully formed on this at the moment yet. I need to do some more work on this. And what he's saying is I need to kind of go away, take this apart, play around with it, put it back together again, and then I can kind of formulate what my thoughts are going to be on it. And it's a very kind of powerful technique that a lot of people use. But I think that I've noticed a lot of Joe Public don't feel that they're bright enough or intelligent enough to do this. And one of the things I've said to people before is that anyone can do this with a bit of practice, start to kind of take apart things and kind of put them back together. And one of the areas that fascinates me is the subject of meaning. I do a lot of reading around the subject of meaning. One of my influences is Viktor Frankl. And so that whole area is an area that I kind of take apart and put it back together again. And for instance, this week on the whiteboard I've got over there to my left, I was upstairs having a shower and I came out the shower, and all of a sudden, you know what it's like when all of a sudden 3 or 4 light bulbs go off in your brain, and I've got a towel halfway around me and sort of like dashed down the stairs, And my wife's probably thinking, why is he running down the stairs to his whiteboard sort of thing? And I grab a black marker pen and I just start scrawling and stuff. And it kind of sounds like Carrie Matheson on Homeland, but it's not quite as bad as that. But it's when you get like a thought and you start to connect the dots on something, you have to get it down either on a piece of paper or whiteboard or whatever. And then you sort of stand back and you look at it and you think, not too sure about whether this makes sense. So maybe that needs to go there or that needs to go there. And it's kind of fun, but also therapeutic at the same time, isn't it?
It is, because what it is I've found is when we were children, we kind of lost the art of that when we become adults. So what we've done was we create problems for ourselves where children are very carefree. You watch your kids playing or you watch your kids trying to put something together. And I found that a lot of things in life, it's almost like, think of it as like, call it the Lego theory. So if somebody was to give you a Lego kit and say, right, now build that. As a child's very inquisitive. It will try to find the pieces. And it doesn't care about color codes, but it's what it does is it gives a very structure. So they're following instructions, putting piece by piece, trying to follow it and trying to build this kit. But when we become adults, we overthink things. We overcomplicate everything. So we kind of, it's got to be right. It's got to be right. We kind of try and become perfectionists, which is wrong. Because always like that, I love that quote, progress over perfection, But what it is with Lego kits, it's the same as adults. When we look at it, it's the same Lego kit, but our mindset changes. So as a child, we kind of enjoy that process of learning how to put things together, trying how to build something. But as adults, we kind of get frustrated because what we've done is we've put actually self-pressure on ourselves. We'll tend to think, well, that should be right every time. And we become like almost trying to be perfectionists where we've got to forget that art form. We've got to then revert back to that child mind almost, that mindset. Because it's almost like this end, a whiteboard. It's like I do it all the time. I've got loads and loads of drafts that I'll think, I'll chuck a few words in. Oh, that was a good idea. Oh, chuck this in, chuck that. It's the same as a whiteboard theory. You kind of just scribble things down. And it was the same as I've got, it's Mike Oldfield's a musician. And he used to have like a piece of paper and a pencil. And he'd sit there and write musical parts down and say, and he'd be next to his pool in it. And he'd just get this, his piece of paper out and he'd start writing music down, because I think like I said, as men, it's a bit like we have forgotten the art of being children. We kind of think once we get into adulthood, we've got to forget that part. We kind of disconnect ourselves from that. We put so much self-pressure on ourselves, and especially on like tasks. And when it comes to our own children, we kind of have to, we'll look at and they almost take over because you think it's got to be done. It's got to be done. And we put that self-pressure on it instead of enjoying that moment.
And it's interesting you say that, actually, because I've been forming a thought in my own mind recently around the whole idea of kind of men's mental health. And one of the things that seems to keep buzzing around in my head quite a lot is this kind of notion that in the last period of history, men have kind of forgotten how to develop this relationship with their own thoughts. And I saw one of your posts recently where you've got a page of the Daily Stoic, which, funny enough, I've got on my desk down there at the moment, and this notion that I think in the last little while men have kind of lost the ability to have that relationship with their own thoughts and understand how their own thoughts work and how the inner mind works. That these kind of ancient traditions of Stoicism and Buddhism and the like enabled people to kind of be almost their own kind of therapists, if you like, at the same time as men's tribes have been stripped away and you're kind of losing that kind of brotherhood. And you just saying to me about this childlike ability to kind of take a concept and kind of play around with it as well, that's almost like a third string to that conversation that men have kind of lost that ability to, because it sounds to me like you have kind of rediscovered that inner creativity, which I think, again, is a kind of common denominator in a lot of guys who begin to understand their mind a lot better. They're willing to play around with that inner childlike creativity a lot more. So there's a number of things kind of coming together in this whole discussion around mental health, and I often think that there's almost like it's almost like the perfect storm happening at the minute in the kind of modern world, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've found myself, and I was kind of like, I put this down, and I kind of threw this thought out there a while back. With mental health, is the foundation of it is frustration, because you're frustrated because you're put into situations that you can't control. And I love that area of the controllables. So you just concentrate on what you can control. You forget what's out of your control. So you just got control on your own thoughts, your own actions, your own speech, everything. It's like you are in control of that part. Everything else you've got to forget because you've got no control of it. And I think as men, what we do is we kind of like pressure ourselves into having to have that control. We almost are like control freaks in a way, to some element, because everything's got to be either perfect or it's got to be right or it's got to be done now or it's got to be done here. The problem is, though, as time's gone by, and plus also the other part of it is it's that whole ego. This is where the ego comes into play. And I love people like Ryan Holiday because he'll break things down. But that other part of it, the ego, that is almost, if you look at it, the barrier of what we put on. We self-impose the barrier of ego because we've got to stand there and be like, it's almost like the chimp brain comes back into play. And it's like, well, you've got to act like this, you've got to act like that. Where if you think back in Stoic days and days gone by, it was very much like men didn't really need to have a label because they just acted. They were their actions, and with the thought process, especially if you look at Stoic content, it's very straightforward. Even if you look at Marcus Aurelius, it's very straightforward, but it's correct in the form that he's used, because he'll put it down and think, this is what I thought, this is the actions I'm going to take. But also what you look at now, it's been good that it's now been introduced because it's teaching men to accept that we can have thoughts, whether they're good, they're bad. Some days are good, some days are bad. Some days that you're happy, some days you're not. It's that whole continuation that now we're starting to read a lot more content that's been put out there, especially Stoic content. But what we've done is we have, and it's great also because there's that many books now being released, over the time, and there's so much being introduced because men, I think we've kind of forgotten who we really are. In that sense, we've become a product of our own, like, almost negativity, because what we've done is we kind of always trying to live up to this standard. This is what we should do. This is the way we should act. This is, and it's kind of imposed on us that we should act that way. And that's whether you're just a single man, you're a dad, what I mean? It's kind of, we put that self-pressure back on ourselves continuously, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the societal pressure is that men should be more like women, but actually men are very different in how they process stuff to women, and they're very different in how they interact to women, and they're very different in terms of how the setup of their tribe needs to be compared to women. And I think what's interesting from what you were saying about Stoicism is that, and following on from this kind of discussion, is that we've lived in times of abundance for such a long time now, and times of comfort for such a long time now, that I think that when people are uncomfortable, either physically or mentally, it sends people's heads into a bit of a tailspin because they think actually something's wrong. I shouldn't feel uncomfortable. It should be a smooth journey. It should be, a calm mill pond, a sea that's free of storms and just calm and serene. And I think that's what blows guys' minds when something happens that they're not prepared for. And I think that the quality a lot of these ancient traditions have is this notion that actually it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be in a state where you're uncomfortable, and the world is not going to end if you feel uncomfortable. And I think that one thing I've noticed about particularly when I've interviewed ultra athletes, they kind of get this because they know that there is this place of discomfort where they can get comfortable in that place of discomfort is where that spiritual growth begins to occur, because they're putting themselves in that fear position, they're putting themselves in that discomfort position, and also they're putting themselves in that position of the unknown. Going back to what you were saying about control, it's an unknown place where they're going to. They don't know where the pain is going to go at mile 56 or mile 72 or whatever it's going to be. And this notion of being comfortable with being uncomfortable is really something that I think that would benefit men a lot to get their head around a lot more.
Yeah, definitely, because it's something that's a concept that I've worked on for quite a while. I always believed, and I've watched it for a while now, we've become so comfortable with becoming uncomfortable, but it's with fixed ideas. So what we've done, we source everything we need. Oh, we'll get this idea, or it could be a Jocko, or it could be David Goggins, or this is all fixed ideas. This has already been. But the problem is, though, there's a great quote out there, and I love this one. It's called, "I'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war." Because essentially what that stands for is, as time goes by, we've come from a warrior culture as men. And it's kind of like, and that's, if you think about it, wars were big. And as years have gone by, they've got smaller and smaller and smaller. And yes, we've had obviously the Afghan period, had the Iraq period, but really they were just they're concentrated moments in time. And that was really the only time that men could be that almost like that back to their original roots. But that was only a small percentage of society of the world when we think about it. But what it is now is, as time gone by, we have become more comfortable with everything. It's become, we've got the comfortable homes, we've got smartphones, we've got laptops, we've got everything there. So it's all there for you. You don't need to do anything. You want to find out an answer? Google it. You want to get some inspiration from somewhere? YouTube it. It's all there. All these tools have been presented to us, and plus also there has been a demise of obviously labor jobs as well. That's been massively, and I think what it is, as society has moved forward, technology has become so prominent in its way and its form that men have become that more, where you used to look at, and you almost just separate. You used to have the laborers, they used to have the office staff, and it's almost like that part of the labourers has decreased, but the actual office staff has increased. So we're becoming in more comfortable situations. When you work in that labour area, and especially if you go back to, like, say, mining times, and a lot of the the industries that was there, it was very, very hard work. Dirty, hard work. But when you work in an office environment, it's very clean, very comfortable. So you've got to think about that shift, that transition. And when I correlated to that quote, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than the garden in the war. So it's always better to be ready. It's always, you can be as peaceful as you like, but you're always ready to act, rather than being constantly peaceful, but not knowing when to act.
Yeah.
And that's where it correlates a lot with martial arts as well, that I find. And with men, and especially in the last, 20 years, what's the good part about it is men have kind of found their own tribes again, whether it be sports, and especially down to martial arts. Because obviously I've trained a lot in martial arts, and I see that a lot. And it's that men are, and it's that great book, Sebastian Junger's Tribe, fantastic book it is, because he really hit the nail on the head when he said that. Because it is, you are that tribe. You come from, let's say, a military tribe, and you leave, and you kind of think, I've lost my tribe now. And I think the other part of it is because I've got a friend of mine named Brian Basho. He's got a podcast at Stason, and obviously we've both been on each other's podcasts, and we talk about this a lot. It's almost like men have kind of been, a lot of times you felt like you were shamed to be a man at one point. It was like, it was wrong, to act this way. It's wrong to think this way, wrong to think that way. But what it is, a lot of men, is you've got to think you can be the strong man, still be that tribe, but you can also show that emotion as well. It's breaking down that toxic masculinity area, which I don't think should ever exist. And once again, that's the ego coming into place when you've been labelled.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I spoke to a guy called Andy Torbett a little while back, and he made the point that when he was serving, he saw a lot more PTSD when he came back from serving than when he was actually serving. And he said to me, I think it's because when we were serving, we had a brotherhood, we had our units, we had guys that had our back that we could talk to, but also we were going onto the battlefield and putting our lives on the line. But there was still that sense of having guys that had your back, would do anything for you, you'd do anything for them, you shared intimate moments with them. If you were away from home for long periods of time, you would be talking about stuff that you missed at home and all this kind of. So there was a therapeutic value to it, but there was also this brotherhood which you're right. I think it's I talk about the lone wolf fallacy, where we've all looked at, the Indiana Jones and the James Bond characters, where they kind of act alone, but in actual fact, history tells us that guys have generally been part of a tribe or a tight knit unit of guys who have their backs, and that's how we kind of operate best. And I think the more we've moved away from that, it's no coincidence that this is when we've become a little bit unstuck in terms of where we are in the world.
Yeah, definitely, because it's that part. It's right when you're in that tribal society, whether it be military, like martial arts, for anything in where there's that group of men, you're very strong together as one, as a team. And it's almost like, if you think about it, it's like the whole Spartan 300. When you look at that as a basic area, you've got a group of men that will fight, stand, and die together, and they'll fight for each other. And it's what it is that part that once you disconnect from your tribe, you will feel like it feels like you're taking the armor off now. You're like, whoa, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to connect. You don't know how to connect with other people outside that area. But the other part of it is you've got to look, because this is another part, because obviously for a good while now, obviously connect with a good mate of mine, Rob Vickers. He's obviously former Royal Marine. He's got something called Gym Self-Harmers Club. And like, it's used in fitness to overcome mental health. So and I found that's like another little tribe that I've connected to. Then I've got obviously martial arts that I've done, and I've got that little tribe. And then it's all these little tribes. But because you kind of split into different areas, you might think, I've got an interest in that, and you've got an interest in that. But you'll suddenly find that once you connect back to people, they've got that understanding with, you feel more comfortable almost. It's almost like you just relax again, and you're like, right, I'm back on form. Because it's once you disconnect from that original tribe, you kind of find like, I'm disconnected, I don't know what to do. You find lost. And a lot of the problem is because I've found this, and I said this as well to Glenn Horton when I spoke to him, and obviously Glenn being one of the top guys at LID, and he and I said to him, I believe it is, once you leave the military, it's because what happens is there's a lot of external problems that happen. And that's a lot of pressure. And sometimes, and this is the big argument in PTS, is a lot of times when people leave the military, it's not essentially the things that they've done there. It's once they've left, it's kind of like, it could be finances. It could be, right, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? I've got a family. How do I pay for this? How do I do this? You've got all this pressure on you that you never had that before. Because everything else was like either paid for, or, you didn't have really a problem. But once you've left that area, you've then got to kind of stand on your own 2 feet again. And this is where a lot of the problems with PTS comes in, because it's people simply not able to handle, because as we know yourself with stress and pressure, it's good to have that level of stress and pressure in our life. We've all got to do it. We've all have, and it's quite good, but it's once you get past that manageable state of it. And this is what a lot of, like, obviously men who leave that tribal society feel, because they kind of think, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And it could be many different angles. And that's where there's a big problem with PTS, especially with the military, because I believe myself, like I said myself, 80%, probably only about 20% of my PTS that was connected to was actually military service. The rest was actually from civilian. So it was kind of like you could see that it wasn't all because I never served frontline. Yes, I was trained, but I didn't actually go frontline. So to me, a lot of the problems actually happen outside once you leave the service, because they start losing their identity. But I always say to people, you've always got that identity, whether you served in the army, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force. You'll always carry that. You earn that cap badge. You earn that uniform. You earn that, that medal. You earn every part of it. So that's your identity's still there. You've just forgotten. And that brings us back to another great quote of mate Rob's, and he uses the phrase, just remember who the F you are. Because at the end of the day, as men, we've got to remember that. Remember who you are. And like he said, that was something that got him through a lot of dark times, being obviously former Royal Marine. And it really, I connected to it, because obviously having served with the Marines myself, and I kind of just clicked and was like, yeah, that makes sense. Because it is about remembering who you are at the end of the day. You'll always be, and we'll always travel through these different chapters of life. And I think that's the other part of it. The whole transition and the way we understand things, we get lost a lot of times because we're kind of trying to work things out. And I think it brings it back to our obviously original conversation of how we have problems and how we're trying to break it down. We're always trying to be problem solvers. We're always trying to find the solutions. And that's the actual part that we get kind of like, right, do I do this? Do I do that? And it's just taking that knee almost and taking that breath, isn't it?
Just taking a break from it and working out. Sometimes it's also, it's kind of seeing the simplicity in life, isn't it? Rather than overcomplicating stuff unnecessarily, which I think we all get kind of guilty of. One thing I really like about you, Chris, as well, is that you're one of the few people that still hold the written word to be kind of sacred, and that your words mean something and that you use your words carefully. And I wondered what your thoughts were in terms of the kind of stage of history we're at right now. You have, like I said previously, you have organic discussions on your podcast, which is what I like so much about it. But you spoke to me on a social media post today, and you talked about some virtues such as honesty, truth, and respect, and loyalty. With so much of the conversation at the moment kind of becoming so polarised, and words particularly being weaponised and used nefariously, what are your thoughts on where we're at right now with that?
I think we're very disconnected and we're very fractured as a society. Because the problem is, though, and there's another great guy out there, and I follow a lot of people because if I see someone, I think I like that. So it's like people like Sin Eaters Guild. So you got like us from Sin Eaters, and he always says you are your actions, which is absolutely correct. Because to me, words are meaningless half the time. It's your actions that count. And the problem is we've come to a society where there's a lot of you've got people like the keyboard warriors or just will just write so much rubbish out there, and it's like, well, can you back up what you've just said? And I think the other part of it is there's a lot of virtues and a lot of values, and I look at it is because my transition through life, I've always believed that you stand by people 100%. You've got that part, and that's a part of what obviously the military instilled in us. And then you've got people like obviously even the martial arts, and I've got people like the Jim Self-Harmers, and I kind of got that, but the number one part is your loyalty. It's the same as to stand there and say your wedding vows. You are making a dedication and your commitment to that one person. So we think about it, we are making constant commitments, but people is words are being said, but there's nothing to back them up. People are very much just to use words in the context of oh, that sounds good, or that sounds good, or that looks good. And they don't concrete it in their beliefs. They're not backing it up. So you've always got to back up what you're saying. And that's the way I generally look at it. Because these values, they're naturally there. We've just forgotten them. So you've got honesty. At the end of the day, like I always said, truth will hurt you, but it won't hurt those that are ready to stand up and think, yeah, that's right. I did this. And it all comes back to that accountability part. So everything's interconnected in that sense of honesty. You've got loyalty. You've got that whole disciplines. But the other part of it is I think as society now, words are quite cheap. They're used in a way, and anybody can spout rubbish on a social media page or any kind of platform. And even society, if you're not going to back up what you're saying, what truth is in those words? Because really, at the end of the day, that's why I say truth, really words are cheap. They can be used so much that it's you're just throwing them away. But what are your actions? What is it that you can honestly stand there and say, are you loyal to people? Look around your own family, your husband, your wife, your children. That is your bond. And at the end of the day, the honesty, the truth, loyalty, all those parts, that's your family. You protect them. And it's the way I look at it is you protect them with your life almost. You think, right, I'd put myself in harm's way for you because you are what makes me. But also, these actions, you've always got to back up everything that you say. And that's the way I generally look at things, because why say it? Yeah. You're only lying to yourself. And I've always said, if you're going to continuously lie for the rest of your life, you'll always look back and say you've never lived, because everything you said is a lie. So there's nothing actually truth there.
Yeah, and I think this interlinks so much with the conversation around ego at the minute, because I think that a lot of people, their egos are running the show to such an extent now that it's constantly kind of, like you say, sound bites, shooting from the hip. You know, everything is kind of reactionary rather than kind of slow down and think, you know, what is going to be the way that I react to this in the way I want to kind of react to it, and respond to it in the way I want to respond to it. And these things are kind of interlinked. You know, we were talking about role models earlier on today, and it's all part and parcel of the same thing, because I think that some of the people that we're seeing in kind of popular culture, they're not exhibiting those virtues that we just discussed, and they're infamous more than they're kind of famous, or sometimes probably famous more than they're infamous. But either way, they're not for all the right reasons, and I think that it's creating an issue where people will think, where the younger generation are looking up to these people for all the kind of wrong reasons, and you're like, actually, you know, maybe we need to get back to a position where, you know, I can remember growing up, you know, I was born in 1979, so I'm 41 now, but I remember that there was always, not just from men, but also women as well, but there was always strong role models, both from sort of older women and older men as well, that kind of permeated the kind of peripherals of our lives. And you would look up to them and you'd say, I want to be like that person when I'm that age. Or, you know, for the ladies, it would be, I want to be like that woman when I get to that age. But it just seems to me as if these people are kind of dying off, but also with how we're so polarized now, a lot of these older, like what I would call wise voices, that, you know, if they heard stupidity, they'd be kind of like, don't be so stupid. But some of these older, slightly wiser voices are really getting kind of drowned out by the noise that there is at the minute, and they're just not being listened to. You know, these are people with, yeah, and you talk about the military guys, some of these older guys that have seen years of service, who, you know, what they've not seen isn't worth knowing. Yet these are people that we really should be listening to a lot more, because they have the experience, they've walked the walk, they've talked the talk, but they're just not being listened to these days. You know what I mean?
I agree with that on a lot of levels, because the problem is I've found myself with the rise of social media over the last 20 years, it's that next, isn't it? It's almost like a dopamine hit. So you've got to keep producing what's cool, what's great, what's this, what's that, what's the next one, what's, you know, who can next go and make money from. And it's almost like, you know, and people are constantly, oh, I've got to follow this, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So what they're doing is they're constantly chasing a ghost, because there'll never be these people, and it keeps changing every 5 minutes. And the problem is, though, it's almost like they kind of think, oh, I want to be like this person, I want to be like that. But it's, in a way, that's false. We'll never be them people, because they're created. You know, they can be one person next moment, and then somebody new will come in, and they think, oh, and this is what kids are growing up and seeing this, and they think, I want to be like that. But they're not, they're saying role models, because it's true. When you look back and then grow up in the 80s and then 90s, there was very solid role models there that you could think, I like that person, or I like that person, or he took something from that person, and I like that part. But the other part, there is a lot of good as well. And like I said, it is being drowned out. And it's always like that great quote, I'd rather be, you know, I mean, hated for being real, you know, and then, you know, rather than loved, you know, and it's, to me, it's like little things like that. They've got to be interjected back into society, because we've lost so many people that the truth stood there, like Tupac said. And remember this going back, and he stood there and said, I don't want kids to look up to me as I'm a role model, I'm a bad man, I've done bad things. And he was trying to tell kids, don't follow me, don't do this, don't do that. You know, I've been on that bad side of life. I'm not cool. And like he said, he never wanted the fame, he just wanted the money for his family. And there's a lot of people that are genuine role models that can stand there and say, don't follow me or don't respect me, because I'm not there to be respected, I'm there to be learned from. Because if you do the opposite of what they've done, then you'll live that good life, because you'll avoid all, you know, those bad parts. You'll avoid going down that path. But the problem is, though, now it's very like wishy-washy, and there's a lot of like, you know, and I think it is more done for that dopamine hit, because at the end of the day, it's all about money. And you look at areas such as Hollywood, it is just one big production, because it's almost like, and it's constant streamed. You know, it's a different celebrity each week, and there's multiple sites. If you remember yourself going back in the 80s, you had 4 channels.
Yeah.
That was it. That's all we got was 4 channels. And you think now we've got thousands. So your brains can't compute. It can't keep up with this dump of information. And you're looking at 100 different celebrities. And that's why I think there's a big problem in society. It's because kids growing up, especially in the last 20 years, they haven't got a solid foundation. They haven't got people like we grew up and thought, I like that actor, or I like this person, or I like that singer, or I like that. Because they were there, and they were constantly, they were always there that we could look to as for like almost inspiration. Now there's somebody new every 5 minutes. So how can kids ever take anything from it? And it's almost like one big pantomime. There's people just changing costumes constantly, you know, and it's like, it's actually setting a wrong, especially for kids now growing up, because there's nobody real. So we've got to lead by example as parents. We've got to say this, that's wrong, or that's wrong. Or if we stand there, and we need to lead by example, because that's the only way that you'll ever, and you've got to be that role model for your kids. You've got to stand there. And that's the other problem, is we do live in society. And I'll be honest, I'll hold my hand out and say I'm accountable. How many days do we sit there and we overuse a mobile phone? You know? And as adults, we've got to say anything. And I'll call myself out all the time, and I think, yeah, well, the wife is said, oh, get off the phone. And I'm like, true, put it to one side. Because we've always got to have somebody else there that's going to call us out our BS, you know what I mean? Because we're lying to ourselves. If we're sitting there just constantly on phones, on, you know, TVs, on this or that, then our kids are going to learn from that. We've got to like separate that part, that we've got to lead by example. So, you know, and it's all about accountability. And that's what it is. It comes back to that part. It's all about that accountability, that we've got to put something on one side and say, right, that's done. And so, you know, get involved with your kids, be that role model, get them involved in activities, show that interest. So it all comes back to standing there and you become the role model, because they're so distracted, you know, from all this like social media scene, that they need somebody solid in their life that they can look to and actually see, right, you're doing this, you're doing that. And you, like I said, and I think I'll always look at that way. You lead by that example.
Yeah. There's a lot, I think, to sort of unpackage from the whole role model debate. And I think you're right. There is not that kind of longevity in characters that there was before. It is very much here today and gone tomorrow. And I think that this is going to make... It's funny when you said about 4 channels, because when I say to my kids, we used to have 4 channels, they look at me like I'm from planet Mars or something when I say that. And it's quite amusing looking at the sort of quizzical look on their face. But I think what's interesting about that is that we have not got that kind of longevity of characters that we used to have. But also I think our generation of sort of, I would say, 35 to I guess 50, we're the last of the generations to kind of play out in the street and
Exactly.
you know, and not have kind of mobile phones. So we're the generation that straddles the digital era and the pre-digital era, so we can remember what it used to be like. And I think that people now are kind of yearning maybe for that simplicity to come back a little bit more and be a little less connected and a little bit less available to everyone all the time. And it's funny, it's a paradox really in our discussion tonight, because in some ways we're more connected than we've ever been, but the irony of it is people are more lonely than they've ever been.
Absolutely, because that's it. But I've said that myself. We're more connected now than we've ever been, but we're more disconnected. So, and I think this is where the good part of it is about, like, there's a lot more now, people going outdoors, you know, doing adventures, going, you know, exploring this area. There's a lot more outdoor activity now than there ever, that has been for a long time. there's always going to be positives and negatives to everything. And I always say this about social media. There's a lot of positive if you use it as a tool. Yes, you can connect to a lot of people. You can network with people. You know, it's a great tool there. It's there to be used. But the good part about it is we're now bringing this back. So we're the ones saying, right, let's go out there, hit the hills. Let's go out there and do these different events. Let's go out there. And hopefully by us creating and going out there and setting that example, then kids will follow. I mean, I did the 3 peaks last year with Jim Self-Harmers. It was we actually did 30 miles. So we've done the full 3 peaks. And we started off like 6 o'clock in the morning, done the first peak. And it was just a group of us. It was actually 30 of us. And we did that. And then what it was, we hit the second. It's fine. We're starting to go to the second, come up to the third. And then you suddenly saw just this line of people. But it wasn't just all adults. It was families. And it was like all the mums and dads and taking the kids up on the 3rd peak. And that one is, you know, and the second peak it was the second peak because the 3rd peak's absolutely murderous trying to get up that peak, what they've done now. So you literally red line in your lungs. I don't see many kids going up there. That's, you know what I mean? But it was actually great to see that families are out. But this is something that we've created now. It's good that adults are actually taking that time and saying to the kids, right, let's get back out there. Let's put the phones down, because we live in such a beautiful country. But the problem is we are very connected, which is great. Technology's there, but we've got to remember it's a tool. We are utilizing its power of but it's once again, with power comes great responsibility. So you then have to look at that area of okay, let's start breaking those barriers down. If there's time for technology and it's used for its good form, you've then got that part where we need to then go back into nature and reconnect with nature, because it has its own power. And it just makes a difference, because that's another great thing. And I've seen so many projects happening in the last couple of years where people are reconnecting with the outdoors. And that's something we definitely need as a society, is to get back. We are natural pagans, as I call it, because we come from there. We've got to return back to there. And it's great to see this movement has happened.
Yeah. And it's happened more than ever, actually, in the last year, where people have been limited in what they can do. So they're rediscovering all this stuff on their back, or literally on their back door, where they can go out into the woods, or they can go out in walks, and people are discovering footpaths that they've never discovered and stuff. And it's definitely, I think it's definitely going through a renaissance. Definitely, kind of walking has become the new gym, if that makes any sense. Definitely in the last year, I would say. Chris, it's been an excellent conversation this evening, and I'm very glad that I got you to come on and speak with me, because we've been able to take apart quite a few different topics, particularly around, relationship with thought and how we deconstruct that. That part of it I really love. And also, I always look forward to speaking to ex-military guys, because you have an understanding of those kind of military values, which I think are so transferable to the kind of civilian world, and we could learn a lot of lessons from them. So I really appreciate you coming on to speak to me this evening. Very much so, sir. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you, reach out to you, shoot you a DM, or whatever it's going to be?
Yeah, the best form is always going to be Instagram, because that's the one that's my main platform that I use. Everything that, if you're on Facebook and you see Darkside podcast, because it's been transferred across from Instagram, because obviously I do have reach on there, but it's always going to be Instagram, because I find that it's one of the better platforms, should I say. So that would be it. So anybody can obviously give us a follow, drop us a DM, you know what I mean? Because I always say DMs are there. If people want to drop us a message, or just say, hey, whatever, come and look at what I'm, either doing a podcast or as many posts as I can physically put out there. But, I appreciate every single person that spends that time, that will actually spend their time reading my content, because to me, that means a lot. Because I always said it, if I could help one person, that would be my job done. And I can honestly say I probably would have finished a long time ago, because the amount of positive reaction I've had come back, and it's humbling. It's absolutely humbling that I get people, complete strangers, just say, thank you. Thank you for what you've wrote there. That's helped me. And I'm like, you're more than welcome. Thank you for your time. So it's always going to be Instagram is my main base, I would say. All
right. Excellent. And I'm going to ask you one last question, which I ask all of the guests that come on the podcast. And I've got a sneaky suspicion I think I might know what your answer is going to be. The question is this: What is it in life that gives you meaning, Chris?
That's a good question. And I know what the answer is always going to be, and it'll always be family. And I know it's quite cliche because people say that, but why I believe in that is because your family is you, and you are your family. You work off each other. And I believe that, like, as a whole, and like obviously my wife and my kids, and to me, they are a part of me that I can look at and be proud of always. Because it's like I watch them, how they evolve, and hopefully I can be, you know, the dad, the husband, you know, the right man that will actually, you know, put that value back into that circle. And to me, it's like they'll always come before me.
I love it. I love it. I ask that question every time, and I always get a different answer. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to leave you to go on your merry way tonight. But again, thanks once again. And I wish you all the best with the podcast going forward. I always look forward to jumping in on it. Like I said, I don't always manage to see the start, but generally it flashes up as I'm approaching Audi. So I will always be listening to it. That is for sure.
People can also connect on iTunes as well, iTunes and Spotify. So if they want to hear the audio version, they can always connect on there as well. So you've got two formats, and it's always on Instagram anyway. For the live feeds are always there.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Chris.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time there.
No worries. Okay. Cheers, man. Take care.
Cheers now. You too. Bye-bye.